So on my last live stream, I added this newsletter component where a user can subscribe to my newsletter. And the trick of adding a component like this, especially one that's publicly accessible so anyone can just spam you random emails, you probably want to add some type of bot protection such as reCAPTCHA version 3, which is what I'm doing here. And I'm going to walk you through how you can get that set up more specifically in tanstack start if you want to do that. Now, the first thing you're going to have to do is log in to this reCAPTCHA site. So this URL, developers.google.com/reCAPTCHA, and then go to introduction and click get started. I have a Google account already set up, so you can kind of type in a label. You can select v3. You can add your domain. So wherever you plan to host your application, this is my domain. You basically paste that in here. And you may also want to add like localhost if you want to try to test this out locally. So you have those two domains set up, and then you select your Google Cloud Platform project, and then you submit it. After you submit this, you'll get back two keys. You'll get back a public key and a private key. So let's look at the example env file I have. You'll see here I have a reCAPTCHA secret key. This is something you want to use on the backend and never expose in your client. And then you have a Vite reCAPTCHA key. Again, this is the public key. The UI can know about this. Now, if you don't know how to actually access the Vite public key, it's basically you just do import.meta.env and then whatever your environment variable was. And then for your backend code, you do a process.env.reCAPTCHA secret key. So that's setting up your reCAPTCHA project in Google and how to use those keys, but I don't want to dive into the code just yet. I want to kind of give you an overview about why we're adding reCAPTCHA and how we're kind of doing it at a higher level. So this is my tanstack start application. And when a user tries to submit this form over here, the first thing that we do is we do a request to Google to get a token. So I'm going to go ahead and just get like a Google icon over here. Let's do this one. And we are going to, first of all, send over our public key information. So send public reCAPTCHA key, get token back. Okay, so we'll get a token back from Google. And then once you get that token, it's your responsibility to kind of forward that token along with whatever information that you want, such as your email, which is what we're doing in this form. We're submitting an email, and then we also send over a token. So I'm going to go ahead and say, send email plus token in form data. Now for my project, I'm using a tanstack server function. So this is where the backend logic is going to run. I'll say a server function, kind of similar to like a Next.js server action, but not really. So the server function is where we are going to take the token and then we're going to validate it. Okay, so to validate the token, you basically send it to Google once again. You make an API call, but then you're also going to send in your secret. So send in secret key plus the token. So that gets sent over to Google, and the Google's going to respond and going to tell you, hey, the token is valid with the secret that I expect, or it's going to throw an exception and you can know to like never store this email anywhere. So if you validate the token and it works fine, what you want to do then is you want to store the user's email somewhere. So in our case, if you want to have like a database over here, you could have like a newsletter database. So say newsletter DB, and that text is giant. So let's go ahead and make it a little bit smaller. So again, we're going to store the email now. So step 4, we stored the email. Yeah, so step 4, we stored the email, and then later on, you can use that email for sending out your newsletter marketing emails or whatever. Again, the reason we're using reCAPTCHA is because anyone could potentially just write a bash script or like a shell script or a node script to inject a bunch of emails automatically to your backend. And reCAPTCHA is there to kind of force a user to have to do it through the UI, and they have some analytics in place to verify that you are not a bot. Now, how do they do that under the hood? I'm not really sure. I think they track the way your mouse moves on the screen. They also track the way you type. They kind of verify, does it seem like you're a real human using machine learning, I believe. But you all can let me know if you guys actually know how they do it with reCAPTCHA v3, because typically there's like a little puzzle we got to solve with v2. With v3, it's just, they don't have that anymore, which is pretty nice. Okay, so this is the overview of how you do reCAPTCHA, and it's probably going to be the same no matter if you're using Tanstack or Next or a single page application with like a REST API. Same approach. You need to protect your API endpoint and verify that reCAPTCHA token before you even do something with the request. Let's look through the code and how this kind of works. So again, when a user hits the landing page, I have this custom hook called use newsletter subscription. What this does is it basically injects a script pointing to the reCAPTCHA API JavaScript, and it passes it the public key here. Okay, this is how you can kind of add scripts dynamically to your page. And then later when we leave this page, it's going to unmount that script. I will say there are third-party libraries that kind of do reCAPTCHA for you. I just feel kind of uneasy with having a third-party library inject scripts on your behalf. During the live stream, we kind of looked through one and like it had a bunch of code of like basically doing this. And I just don't feel comfortable with a third-party library injecting script tags into my application. All right, so once you've injected the script onto your page, it's going to load in. And at some point, this window.g reCAPTCHA will be defined. I guess the G stands for Google. And then when it's ready, so we're going to attack on a ready with an anonymous callback function. We can then call g reCAPTCHA.execute. We pass it the public key, and then we also give it an action of submit. And then when it's done doing that request to Google, like we just talked about, so we're on step 1 right now. We're talking about step 1. We'll get back a token. And then we can use that token and send it to our subscribe server function here, which is step 2 in our diagram. Notice that we're passing the email and the reCAPTCHA token. This is step 2. Okay, so now let's look at the actual server function, the backend logic of how this is validating that the person making the request has the proper token that you'd expect. Okay, so in tanstack, you can actually make something called a server function. I can add a validator to do some ZOD validation for the inputs that come in to make sure I have an email, and I also have a token. Once you get that token, you can make a post request to this reCAPTCHA/API/site verify. You pass it your secret key, and then you also pass it that token that was sent in the payload. And then you'll get back a response. If the response was good, then you can kind of just move on and run some code or whatever you want to do. In our case, we're going to store that in the database. If the response is bad, you can throw an exception and let the user know that like something went wrong. We detected that you're a bot. Okay, so again, this is step 3. We send the token to Google, and then Google's going to send back a response, which could either be valid or invalid. And then finally, step 4 is you store that email in your database. In my case, I'm actually doing another fetch request to a mailing list application I have. So it's basically forwarding that email to another service I have, which is storing all my emails for all my like little side projects, so that I don't have like a different mailing list for every single course or every single application I build. If you subscribe to anything web dev Cody related, I want that to live in a single newsletter location. So that's kind of how it works. Now, again, the reason I did the custom hook is because there's actually 2 places in my application where I have the opportunity to subscribe to my newsletter. So after you finish the course, I have the state updated section, and I want to just have some reusable functionality. So I made a custom hook. I probably could have gone even more, abstracting it to have like a custom form that's shared between both pages. But I find just using a custom hook to abstract away the logic makes your code easier to maintain, and then keep the formatting, the HTML, and the styling just separate, right? So I can kind of just hook into this thing wherever I want. So let's look at the course completed. All I do is I pull in this hook, and then I can basically call handle submit on any type of form object that I want. So I can make whatever form I want and call that handle submit, which is going to wrap and do the reCAPTCHA stuff and then forward the email. Now that I think about it, there might be a really cool way to abstract this away so that it's not coupled to email. And instead, it just kind of wraps the form submission and then tacks on a reCAPTCHA token. But, sometimes just doing the simplest thing is the best thing you can do. All right, that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed that little overview of how I got reCAPTCHA working on this side project. Again, if you have a publicly subscribable endpoint, you probably should add reCAPTCHA. Maybe even a double email confirmation type of thing is another way to prevent people from spamming you with fake emails. And then also when you send out your email list, you should probably go through, and anything that gets bounced, you should just delete that from your email list, because the more bounced emails you send, I do believe you're going to get ranked poorly, depending on if you're using like AWS SES. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Before I leave, there's a Discord channel that I have. You can join if you want to find a place to kind of hang out and talk to other developers or ask some questions or send me a message. Join my Discord. Have a good day. Happy coding.